Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Shadowverse. Today is Monday, August 3rd. Now, it could be that just because I'm playing so much of this game, like pretty much it's been 2-3 weeks, it feels like non-stop of playing this game, that I don't remember the score rewards were assigned or rewarded, but apparently at some point I did get some small amount of score rewards for playing ranked. There is also at some point a decent argument to do the open 6 records. I think I'm not sure if these records have been here. So from now till September 29th, they want me to potentially get 5 victories, they want me to get 15 out of 5 into 0 victories, so like total wins, and that's probably beyond me. And then I guess your options here, you can change the sleeves on the take 2 and open 6. So there is an argument to potentially try and use up these tickets, but there is also an argument to not do any of that until the next expansion comes, whether the next expansion comes out in a week or whether it comes out in 3 months. We have this much shorter timed crossover experience that only ends on August 16th, and it turns out that the way this is really going to work for me is just by grinding Cornelia as the easy character, and that's how I'm gonna get everything. But I am gonna get everything. It gives you about 2,000 points if you can get a single win with each of the 8 characters against Cornelia, and so I have just been spending like an hour or two covering the main story, and then spending an hour or two playing this to grind out all of this. And yeah, we'll just almost certainly never beat Charles, just because I don't have the skill in the cards right now. Meanwhile, as the accountability section, I guess, can easily be summed up as I am going through Gears of Rebellion at the moment, and I just finished Luna's story. And honestly, this section, this chapter, this episode, way better written than the Guild War or Chapter 1 and 2, the Morning Star sections. They are now getting up to even 7 out of 10, which I honestly don't suspect that a main story for a collectible card game is going to get much higher than that. It would be amazing if they could get up to like a 10 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10 story, but yeah, that's probably not going to happen. But it's just like so much better written. Plus it has this nice factor of you only have 4 people in the story instead of having 8 people in the story, so there's not anywhere as much repetition or just bad writing because they have to stretch all the good writing between so many different characters. So I'm making good progress. That being said, going through the main story still is just extremely long. It's going to be 30 to 40 hours just to get through the main story, let alone actually doing the quests and playing the battles, which I'm just skipping all that, which makes these pre-recorded episodes that I'm making actually very weird for me because I'm not really criticizing the video game part and the interactive part. I'm just criticizing the story, and that's something I don't typically do in video games, because typically you expect there to be some interaction. But in this case, that was not an efficient use of my time. Alright, so I also have learned that these decks here were just randomly made, so there's no point in really playing those. These decks here were mostly designed to defeat Charles, so I've yet to actually make any default let's play this for ranked play decks. which is just another symptom of this game either taking all of my time or sucking the life out of me. It's way more onboarding for this game than it was for Magic: The Gathering Arena. That being said, I think I have way more of an understanding of the cards in general and the gameplay mechanics in general, because I think there's less craziness and randomness as far as expansions that have new keywords compared to Magic. And I think I probably, percentage-wise, have a pretty high understanding now of a pretty high percentage of all the cards. Like, I'm in rotation at the very least. I feel like I am somewhere around 40% of all the cards, and somewhere maybe around even 70% of having at least one of all the cards. The temporary system also might affect that somewhat. I now know through the main story what this playfield means. This is the world that the story is taking place in. It's a robotic world, mechanical world. It's just a whole bunch of robots. Or, to be more accurate, androids. For the most part, they look like androids, humans. Let's see if there's anything in the settings I want to change here. Reduce battle animations. Let's turn that off for fun. I still haven't activated fusion, so there is that idea, I guess. And there is something about the most recent expansion not having English voices for the cards, which I don't know if that means the English voices for the cards will eventually be localized, which seems a little weird, because it would be odd to be late on that. Or if it's just straight up that they've decided to stop localizing the voices for the characters in the cards. I've also found that some of these cards, there's a Japanese speaking character, some of these characters on the cards are now recognizable to me as people in the main story, but I still feel like there aren't a lot of that. It seems like at least 60 to 70% of all cards in every expansion are just basic fantasy characters. Like, there's kind of nothing more to that. This elf tracker could easily have been a character from the first world in Chapter 1, but we never saw an elf tracker that looked like this. Same is true for, like, Fairy Whisperer, although Fairy Whisperer might be Larissa. It's hard to remember what she looks like. Like, her as a character has been, like, completely eliminated as an important character in Chapter 2, Chapter 3, and Chapter 4, and Chapter 5, where I'm playing it now. It's just like that is something that's not there. So there's apparently an animation that plays every time you summon a character, and maybe every time they attack. And I had that turned off for speed's sake.
Stand at the edge of eternity.
Yeah. And I probably should keep it turned off. I've also got to a point where I kind of know that this character looks like a different character than I thought it was. But yeah. These fairies, for instance, we've not seen any fairies. And this Okami looks like another card. That they are doing a thing which I think is the right move, frankly, in which they are focusing very much on having fewer random people and instead having 2 or 3 versions of the same character in different cards.
Help me, fairies.
See, that was probably a bad choice, because fairies don't have a special ability, so losing one of them wouldn't have mattered. Probably. Whereas Fairy Whisperer, if I ran into a card that let me bring it back to the hand and then play it again, would have given me 2 more fairies. So I guess that is just a general long-winded way of saying I'm still very much learning this card and this game and going through it. One of the things that the Steel Rebellion chapter of the main story is doing is that it is focusing less on having just a random fight for no good reason. In the past, the sub-chapters in an episode have so heavily focused on the idea of having a battle after every single conversation that they've bent reasonableness out of place, and very often it was bending over backwards to have a fight between one leader versus another leader. In Steel Rebellion, I've yet to see any of the leaders fight each other, which is great because we don't need that. They're now fighting just, well, robots, but let's see.
This ends here.
Here you have a treant. It still is a very weird situation though with the main story, because what it feels like is that every anniversary, every year, this is a 4-year-old game, feels like every year they put in a new bit of story. And there was a card expansion either after that new bit of story or coincided with that new bit of story, so that you so that there are new cards based on the new main story. So someone who is playing the game from day one is going to get a reasonable amount of interactiveness, but anyone who is late to the show, anybody who's starting to play Shadowverse in its 4th year, which this is something I think all card games should really plan for, and none really do, is they should have planned for a better onboarding experience for people who are late to the party. I don't think Hearthstone does anything to really help you. Shadowverse gives you like 50 packs, and that gets you cards, but it doesn't do anything for the story. Seems like you keep your skill ranking after a month. Interesting. So you can't potentially even fall down a skill rank, or I bet you fall down from a D1 to a D2, but you don't fall down from a D0 to a unranked character.
You must die. A dazzling victory.
Which I guess means maybe if you get to master level, you're at that point just a master forever. Which are but yeah, there's no onboarding experience, I think, for someone late to the party with Hearthstone. There's no onboarding experience, definitely, for people that are late to the party with Magic the Gathering Arena, considering how pretty much even someone who's been playing Magic the Gathering in paper form since its original release of alpha, would still be late to the party, playing in arena, because you can't scan in your old cards. I guess at a certain point I'll stop comparing Shadowverse to Hearthstone and Magic once Shadowverse becomes just solidified in my mind as, alright, this is just Shadowverse, we can stand on our own and just discuss it from its own perspective. But I'm not quite to that point yet. I think the thing with the animations is it's not even the animations that need to be turned off as much as it's the sound effects that need to be turned off.
No one gets past me. This is our way out.
So let's go back here. Reduce battle animations. And then I didn't like the leader animations. Display cost effects. Let's see what that looks like. Display opponent's emotes. You could just turn that off. Yeah. And I'm not sure you could turn off voices without turning off sound effects. But I guess we could try. See what that feels like. It's probably going to be fairly boring. Because I think it will just get fairly quiet at that point. So it seems like they've done something to these cards. So now that it shows an attack and defense differently. Which I don't know if that's a bad thing. I don't know why you'd consider that a bad thing. I've kind of realized that ambush, when this has something like evolve and then ambush again instead of same as the unevolved form in parentheses, that means that it can regain ambush. So I can have this attack for 8 potentially, with it being in less risk. So like I can attack here, and then I can evolve it to 6, and that should give it ambush again. But it didn't. Interesting. Well, that's weird. That's not what I was expecting for it to do. So clearly I still have some learning to do. We do have a decent amount of video game news to talk about. Yet another Ubisoft employee has left Ubisoft. Ubisoft manager accused of doing something horrible, which it does certainly now seem like there's just nothing left here to potentially even put in a position where you would give them the benefit of the doubt. Like, there's just been so many accusations with so many lack of denials that you kind of just have to assume, or at least I feel like I have to assume at this point, that every accusation is true, and there's like not a oops, I don't know what happened there. There is a replay system I found that you can go back into the main menu and look at the replays of games you've played recently. So you can actually go back and look at what happened if you're confused. Yeah, it's an unfair thing to definitely say, well, there's been so many accusations against this person and he hasn't denied any of them, therefore I should just assume that the persons are guilty. But on the other hand, that seems very natural and normal in society to do, and may very well just be a basic form of mob rule coping mechanisms. Like, these people are alive, these people could have some kind of response. Like, there should be some form of response, even if it's just a PR company or a lawyer saying we're currently in the process of pre-litigation against these accusers, we completely deny this. You can easily have a lawyer write something up to deny the accusations. We deny any and all accusations made against us. But it does seem like you would have to be just woefully ignorant or woefully intentionally trying to believe in just a larger conspiracy than actually is occurring here. There is, I think, with Ubisoft a conspiracy in the sense that all of the actually mistreated employees got together and started working together to bring to light a lot of these accusations, which is kind of the disconnect from someone outside, is that instead of these stories coming out bit by bit, they all came out at the same time, which does seem very coordinated, and that is something that certainly sticks in my craw, is that it seems like a lot of the mainstream video game journalists knew about these stories, knew about these incidences, were told about these incidences, and the mainstream video game journalist society or group there failed to do their jobs so incredibly as far as reporting on any of these. Like, it's not hard to say, I've heard a rumor from a single source, I cannot confirm, that there's trouble brewing inside of Ubisoft, that there is at least one major employee who's like known for having meetings at strip clubs, looking at porn on his work computer during business hours, in front of other employees, banging his head on the table and saying women don't sell. It's just like a ton of that stuff that could easily have been printed, and it definitely does put like all streamers and all video game critics in a moral quandary, to say the least, where like I had a series that's been on the back burner a little bit as far as going through the Assassin's Creed games. I was at some point thinking about playing Assassin's Creed 3. Now, if I choose to go back and play Assassin's Creed 3, do I potentially have to address, or can I just fully separate the art from the artists and just talk about the game? Like, so the inherent problem with boycotting a video game or covering video games from Ubisoft is, while Ubisoft treated its employees terribly, it really hasn't done anything to streamers and video game critics. If anything, it treated them very nicely, and that's how they got away with the video game journalists not reporting about their bad behavior. So yeah, up until this point, the only games I've really boycotted are ones that like abuse the DMCA and actively would threaten me. But yeah, they don't sound like somebody you really want to get in bed with or do business with.
Come forth. Luminescence. Shining hope.
Take that.
So, if anything, it probably is a indicator I probably won't get back to covering a knowing Ubisoft game for a while. And you would think with all the articles that did like criticize Uplay and said Uplay was so terrible. Yeah. The sad truth is that as just a regular civilian, if I step out of the shoes of a video game critic for a second, as someone who just wants to play games, it really sucks to have no journalist with any integrity reporting on things that are of public interest. And all video game journalists, and this is barely an exaggeration, pretty much all video game journalism looking upon itself and acting as if it is nothing more than a advertising arm of those companies. I guess at a certain point, even if you were like very anti-SJW, which I think a lot of video gamers are, I think that the kind of failure of Exclusively Games, which was trying to be a video game review website without any politics in it, I think that charter itself probably fails, and that in part led to the failure of that site. Also, I just think Exclusively Games or anybody trying to make their own website where you have to read reviews in text is unlikely, because there's this kind of inherent misunderstanding of what a gamer is. Gamers typically don't want to read a lot unless you're talking about visual novel gamers, and then you're talking about a very niche audience. So yeah, I just don't think man, I wish I'd known that wasn't gonna kill that.
How did I lose?
As you're gonna see, I'm gonna lose quite a lot here, and that does kind of boil back down to the problem of not having any pre-built decks and not really having enough experience. Like, I really don't feel like I had so much of a challenge in Hearthstone or Magic the Gathering Arena, which I think inherently also goes to show that Shadowverse, while it may look deceptively simple, actually is more strategic.
This one's for my family. I have to act.
But yeah, if I was gonna try, and I'm definitely not the person to do this, but if I was gonna try to make a website like Exclusively Games, I would first of all make it very interactive and audio visual, and not have much text at all. And I would say, no, you can't keep the non-video game stuff out, like, to a certain extent, because it just leaks in. Like, bad behavior from Ubisoft has to be mentioned And I think you can certainly do it in a much more nuanced way. And that's probably what I would do in the next Ubisoft game that I do play. And I own far too many of them to not eventually get around to playing another Ubisoft game. Is just at the very beginning in the first episodes of one of my series, I'll just say, yes, I'm aware of the bad behavior that occurred during and after, and probably before. Well, I guess I'd probably phrase that. I'm aware of the bad behavior that happened internally around the time that this game was developed and released. You can seek out that information if you're interested. I personally am going to separate the art from the artist from this point going forward and just review the game. I think that's a fair middle ground to say is, look, this information is out there, you can go seek it if you want. If you don't care one bit, that's fine. In the same way that Amazon.com has some awful business monopolistic tactics, and you honestly shouldn't be doing any business with Amazon.com, but they've also pulled the Walmart model to a new level in which it is very, very difficult and very, very dangerous to try and do business with any other company. Like, even as a geek who potentially wants to buy like computer parts, I'm not really willing to go to eBay for any kind of electronics. I'm not really willing to go to Alibaba and frequent that. I'm not willing to go to Newegg. Newegg at one point was really good, but it has just been pretty much garbage in the past decade. So yeah.
Be gone.
So yeah. Even if you were gonna shop on like Walmart.com, like that's something I don't do, but honestly it would probably be smarter to do that. And I was thinking, and this is just more me thinking out loud, what industries would be the right industries to break Amazon.com up into? Like, I think you probably break up the book sales into its own separate company. I think you break up or forbid them from doing business in the clothing market, because selling clothing is particularly bad. I think you clearly don't buy their BS that they let a bunch of third-party sellers on their site, because they let these third-party sellers on their site just so they can steal their business basically and copy it. Like, you probably would spin off the Amazon Basics. You probably would spin off like PillPack, even though that's not really even something that is heavily integrated. You probably would spin off Twitch and the video streaming company and just break it up. But you probably spin off the food and the Amazon Fresh's companies. There's easily 4 or 5 different companies that Amazon.com should have been broken into. Not that really fixes much, because they split Verizon and AT&T, or AT&T in half, and one of them became Verizon, and that didn't really create any competition. They just conspired and worked together. It created small, superficial amounts of competition, but did not really benefit anybody but themselves.
Time to say goodbye.
And I guess at the end of the day, this is kind of the problem, is it is inherently, and I'm going to get into an economics rant if I'm not careful here, but it's inherently just a red herring and a misnomer to say that you can have capitalism at this point, this extreme late stage capitalism that the world has, not just the United States but the world in general. It just doesn't work. And chasing after one monopoly, to have the government always behind, always chasing after the next company that has a monopoly, is not going to accomplish anything. The truth of the matter is the easiest and most efficient and successful way to solve a problem like Amazon.com is just to publicize it. Literally say, we're taking your company, Jeff Bezos, we're making it a public utility. It is now in charge of delivering the food rations, the clothing rations, and the entertainment rations to the millions upon millions of people in the United States that are unemployed and unable to get employment due to the fact that the economy has finally collapsed, which they should have seen coming a long time ago. And frankly, they did see it coming and just didn't want to admit it to themselves. But yeah, I won't go any deeper into that because I think I've mentioned that several times. Alright, moving on for news. Let's just start burning through the news, because honestly there is no reason for me to stretch out this ranked gameplay. Like, we are just in this weird position where ranked gameplay is not going to get fixed until I finish the main story and have enough time at that point to build some decks. Gamatsu has an article here that says No More Heroes, the original game, has been rated for Switch in Taiwan, so a port announcement might be coming in. And it certainly is an indicator about where Nintendo has gone. Even when they originally on the Wii allowed No More Heroes, it was an indicator on how they were more and more willing to have adult content on the game. Here you have the main character of No More Heroes groping this one of the female characters with her blouse open, showing her bra. It was rated M. It wasn't targeted towards kids in any way, and frankly No More Heroes is much more about the violence than it is the sex. But you definitely wouldn't have seen that on the Nintendo 64. There I think were a couple of games late into the Nintendo 64 era, but not anything major, not anything that caused any kind of controversy.
Oppose me and burn.
The No More Heroes game, I guess it is worth mentioning, also heavily used the Wiimote functionality, which made it much more of a fun game than it was when it I think originally was ported with controllers, because it is a much different experience to hit the A button to swing a laser sword versus swinging a Wiimote to swing a laser sword. And it definitely is probably the most recognizable Wii games that actually use the Wii functionality well, and caused trouble when it tried to be ported later. And we'll even see that with the Switch. Once the Switch is no longer Nintendo's big unit, if they don't have something like a Wiimote, which they may very well just be forced to always have something that can emulate a Wiimote, but if they don't have something that has that functionality, there will be things like Wii Fit Adventures that will just not be playable. In fact, there already are things that are not playable on the Switch Lite because you cannot disconnect those Joy-Cons that are built into the Switch
You're a
Lite.
solid fighter.
You can still play those games if you have a second spare set of the Joy-Cons, so effectively that would mean if you buy the Joy Lite to save yourself some money, you actually won't probably save yourself any money in the long run because you'll have to end up buying accessories. And that is something I think that we've seen less of lately. There definitely was a time in video games and just in general in which you bought a base packet, or you bought there was the old cliche of buying a car and then getting upcharged for like chrome protection and leather car seats and upping the radio. And I think car sales still may do that somewhat, but even car sales I don't think bother to do too much of that. The NES, for example, like, you probably, if you didn't get the model with the zapper, you would then have had to buy the zapper. They tried to get you to buy the Rob Robot, and not too many people bought that. But then I think if you got the model with a zapper, you didn't get a second controller. But even at that, the NES is nowhere as bad as what you really had with the Tower of Power and the Sega Genesis, where you would have potentially a base unit and then a CD interface and a Master System modifier, 32X modifier, Sonic and Knuckles modifier. I mean, you could just keep adding things and adding things to that.
Come out wherever you are.
In the story for Steel Rebellion, Luna as a character is written way better than she was in the previous ones, but they still run into a problem where she just is animated here. She's just animated too young looking, frankly. They need to age her up in the main story, and they kind of needed to age her up in this artwork. Although you can get different skins to make her look older, or look completely different as a different character. Although some of that is also premium. Like, one of the things that they're trying to sell right now is about $30 worth of premium currency. But in previous stories, she has been written like an 8-year-old. A lot of times just going, I don't know, or not saying anything at all, just 2-3 word sentences. In Steel Rebellion, they brought her up to being able to speak like a 11-year-old. She's actually having full sentences that make full sense, and there's actual conversation there. Your mean comments still are around, but they're not repeated so often. She does have kind of a bunch of catchphrases that she repeats a lot, and I wouldn't put it past it that almost all the characters have those catchphrases. They're just getting repeated quite a lot.
To bury me. Isn't this magic wonderful? I am eternal.
So yeah, what I would have done with her, the main problem is like her eyeline. She's about a foot shorter when put next to any of the characters, and when you're playing the game, it doesn't really matter because they zoom in and they show everybody about the same size. But in the main story, she's about a foot shorter. That puts her eyeline looking at the chest / breast of every single character. Her head should probably be tilted up at enough of a degree that she's just always looking up to people. I would age her up. I would get rid of the ridiculous massive amounts of adornments on her, and maybe go with more of a fancy kind of private school uniform for her. Make her 4 to 5 years older. Take this doll, get rid of the doll, but take kind of this design of this doll and put it on as a patch on her shoulder, just as a reference. She needs to be kind of depicted as slightly rich because that's her backstory. They finally kind of revealed that, but it seemed fairly obvious. You would want to get rid of the twin tails and the hat, and you could do that by either giving her one hat and one long ponytail, or you just change the hairstyle completely and get rid of the hat completely. You don't fully need that. And yeah, just make her a foot taller and she would mix in a lot better with the other leaders. That being said, they also kind of need to try and do something to make characters like Urias here, the vampire, and Rowan here shorter, because they are about a foot taller than all of the other female characters, and they have way too much muscles that makes them feel just out of place. All the female characters kind of have this, I would call it like a mid-90s anime style to them, and then all the male characters, or the default male characters, look like they're from a Baki the Grappler / JoJo's Bizarre Adventure type anime. Maybe not so much in animation style as JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, but definitely in the anatomical orientation. Yeah, Urias next to Luna is pretty much the worst comparison you can have, just because the size is so different. But again, when you're playing a card game, they never really put they don't put the full body animations from the main story there, so you don't see it, and so you don't really get that comparison. I'd also say Luna's voice is kind of annoying. It would be fairly nice to be able to replace what Luna looks like when an opponent plays him, because you can change the leader skin for yourself and thus brag that you have paid for this a premium leader skin replacement. But if you just don't want to hear her say "Mother, Father, come on" every time, the only thing you can really do is turn the voices down. Which then, if you turn down the voices, you get all the card voices turned down also, so it's fairly annoying either way. Let's see. 2 damage to our leader. Sure.
I'm just getting warmed up. Take that.
Moving on with the news, I'm moving very slowly here. This week's Japanese games releases are Neptunia Virtual Stars and the Coma Double Cut and more. Let's see. Also, La Mulana 1 and 2 for Switch was already available worldwide. And Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom for PS4 and Switch was already available worldwide. Digital only. There's quite a longer list of games that have come out, either launching worldwide or were already available and have now come to Japan. La Mulana and Spelunky both apparently had like online Flash versions of their game and were notorious for being very difficult. I kind of wish I had known that before I had tried to play Spelunky, but yeah, I think that worked fairly well for me in my coverage of Spelunky, which I think was just a spotlight. But I don't think there would be much of a difference in covering La Mulana, which I don't think I have covered. The remastered versions or the remake versions of them. There's a game here called Swim Sanity. That's interesting. I didn't actually look at these lists of names. And then Corpse Party Blood Drive. I want to see what Swim Sanity is. I bet it's an adult game for the summer. I was wrong. It is instead 4-player versus Smash Brothers clone. Interesting. Apparently they're swimming, which that's kind of the last thing I'd want to do is be underwater and playing 4-player versus 4-player versus a boss. Multiplayer underwater shooter. Its planned release is August 7th, so it's not out yet. Okay. What would this be if I hit this? Do that. And then hit that. Alright, so let's start covering some games. Here we have one with Asian words called Death Angel Trial, which is probably a trial game for Death Angel, but it might be the game itself. It looks like it's one of these horror games that is kind of poorly animated, and it definitely feels like it's a Chinese game because there's a lot of text on it. Also kind of feels like it is a clone similar to some of the other games I've seen like that, where it's supposed to be really scary, bloody, and grotesque. English is not supported, it's $3.39, and it is in Chinese subtitles and interface and Japanese audio. There is another game I'm thinking of to compare this to, but unfortunately Steam's references and comparisons still are so bad that it's not being compared to that one. I want to call it Death Parade, but I don't think that that is the actual name of it. Alright, well, I've completely lost. You can do this. You do this. You evolve that.
What a banquet.
And guess you could do that.
Tasty.
And then that. And then that. And see, this is about the exact point where I lose a game because he's got one more card than me, he's got one more character on the field than me. I've got basically no strategy. I'm going to play these last 2 cards in the next turn, and then I'm completely next we have a game on Steam called Frog Fractions Game of the Decade Edition. Frog Fractions was this like huge hugely successful game when it first was released because it has like secrets and goes really crazy, and everybody really loved it once they realized that it wasn't just like a game that it looks like it is. The question though is, I don't think Frog Fractions actually was on Steam. It was like a web game, and I don't know for sure if this is the actual developer. And apparently it's been 10 years since Frog Fractions originally came out. So okay, I guess I could put this on the fall list. It's rated very positively. I guess I can just put it on the wish list. It's free. Although there is some $7.99 DLC. I would be careful here to make sure that this isn't somebody who's just made a Frog Fractions clone. But otherwise, yeah, it looks fine. I have not experienced the experience of playing Frog Fractions, and it is one of those experiences that has just been so incredibly hyped up that it's very possible there's no way it could live up to the hype.
Witness the power.
Luminescence. Shining hope.
So, yeah. Why is this one invoke?
My lord.
It invoked because of a rally of 10.
Your strength is formidable.
Even when I play unranked, though, I am running into severe trouble getting any victories, and we are just going to drop right down to 1200, and we'll see if that does anything for us. Although at the core of us, here I have a core replacement for Yuan, who would be the normal leader there. I got that for some reason, so I think I got it from opening a card pack and getting a specific card. Now, this is actually Havencraft, so this is a replacement for Eris.
Prepare for defeat.
Yeah, at the core of it, the reason I'm playing any collectible card game is so I can mostly ignore it and lose and maybe just get the daily quest done and talk about the video game news. But it is kind of rubbing me the wrong way just how consistently I'm losing here. And honestly, if I wasn't spending so many hours covering the main story, I would be putting in more hours off screen to get better. What I wouldn't be doing, however, is cheating, which is what, of course, Magic the Gathering accused me of.
I won't hurt you.
I did run into one person that disconnected as they were obviously going to lose, and they kind of had already taken the final blow, and they disconnected. And I will say the reconnect mechanism for Shadowverse, it's a little long. It pops up a box and says attempting to reestablish the connection or something along that lines, and then it says the outcome will be determined in 60 seconds. So you have a box there where it will try for a full minute to reconnect, and if it fails to reconnect in that 60 seconds, then it runs through some kind of algorithm to determine who wins and who doesn't. And I still have yet to see anybody actually run out of cards, so I don't know what happens then. Like, it clearly is so rare an occasion that they haven't even bothered to tell people what happens in the tutorial. Alright. Banish 3. Okay, so if I do this, it banishes that gives me 3. And then if I evolve this here, we can kill that. TechRaptor has an article, Leader Shoot Larry, Wet Dreams Don't Dry Twice has been announced. They didn't write the title correctly, even though it is wrapping around. I don't know if this is I guess this is a sequel to What Dreams Don't Dry, which is weird because I thought What Dreams Don't Dry was the one that was so bad that they pulled it from sale. As yet another Leisure Suit Larry game in the long-running Leisure Suit Larry series. Maybe it was a different game though that they pulled from sale for being just so bad. I guess it must have been a different game because they wouldn't continue down that narrative and that series. They've never had a series for Leisure Suit Larry that works that way, where you have sequels that are the same name. It was just like Leisure Suit Larry 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in the original series, just numbered, and each numbered one had a pun subtitle. It is worth mentioning that while Leisure Suit Larry is lewd, it's not usually so chocked full of sexual content that it actually would be fun to play the game, or interesting to play the game for that. You can definitely get a lot more in a lot less time now, particularly now since everyone has access to the internet.
Wings of light, show your might. I better get a boat, iron my fair share.
So yeah, you kind of have to be in that match game mentality. If you've ever seen the match game, either the new match game or the old match game, I prefer the older match game, Richard Dawkins episodes. There may have been a black and white match game that was played straight before Richard Dawkins, but yeah, the 70s and 80s era match game where there's a lot of implication and snickering and implied dirty talk without there being explicit, like, hardcore conversations or imagery. Yeah, you're not gonna see anything super explicit and hardcore in Leisure Suit Larry unless they've changed the format of the game, and I don't know why you would change the format of the game. That would be a little weird. If anything, I think you probably take Leisure Suit Larry and need to do about the same thing you would need to do with Duke Nukem, and just embrace the fact that the world has changed around them and they are not characters that make any sense in a modern reality in a modern video game.
This wasn't worth it.
You potentially throw out Leisure Suit Larry as having, like, sired a kid, and then he's got, like, teenagers he's embarrassing with his creepiness, and he's having to potentially recognize that he's, like, way too old to be hitting on women, and that would inherently be the biggest joke, is that to play as a Leisure Suit Larry character who's in his, like, 80s or 90s, and he's like embarrassing his grandkids, and he's trying to hit on women, and they're just going, "Oh, you're so cute," and not even taking offense to it, to make him just completely incapable of being who he once was would be a thought. But then again, if you're going to age up a character that much, then you're effectively killing off the series. So that probably wouldn't be the right way to maintain a series like that. The right way to maintain a series like that is to just always have it set in the swinging 60s, swinging 70s time. Just set all stories, not in the modern day, but back when his sleaziness at least was commonplace, if not acceptable. And then that addresses a lot of issues. And it frankly wouldn't hurt for a lot of writers to set a lot of their stories in the 60s or 70s. instead of modern times. There is kind of this default to modernality that happens in story writing, which then just often makes your story feel a little bit dated when you have somebody with like a Nokia flip phone and now everybody has smartphones, and having a Nokia flip phone makes no sense. Moving on, Gamma Sutra has an article, Monster Hunter and Resident Evil is driving growth at Capcom, which I think we already kind of knew that. Like, that this isn't new news. Like, the idea that it's driving growth instead of just driving profits is nice to hear it being said. I hope that actually is true, because I could also see Capcom pretty much just sitting on the success of Monster Hunter and Resident Evil and not developing or improving on either one of those series. And I'm not really expecting too much of an improvement in Monster Hunter, since the last Monster Hunter was kind of a major improvement for making the game more accessible to Western players. So I don't think we're going to see giant major changes there. I don't think, if they are going to make a Resident Evil 4 remake, I don't think we're going to see much of a big change between Resident Evil 3 and Resident Evil 4. There might be a lot more work put into it just to make sure it's not a disappointment, where Resident Evil 3, I think, was a bit of a disappointment. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great. Here I have a leader replacement for Yuan as Nexus. But yeah, the actual growth for potentially Capcom's next two big prod games in their two major series actually won't be there, I don't think. I think we're gonna quickly find that that's not the case. I would say Shadowverse almost does make an argument for having multiple servers. Not really. It just needs more ranks. Clearly I shouldn't be at the rank I'm at, or the people I'm playing against shouldn't be at the rank they're at, because I really shouldn't be able to just bone this up this much so that I'm having 7-8 losses in a row. And you could certainly look at that issue and say, well, there's a ton of Japanese players, and the Japanese players really know how to play the game and are really good. But
I walked the edge.
But yeah, it would be kind of a silly solution to say, well, let's put all the Japanese players in the server, segregated away from all the other players because they're just better at the game and they've potentially had more time to play the game and learn it. Like, it's way easier just to say we need more rank modes. And that is what Hearthstone eventually added, is just a increase in challenged modes.
You're a big fella.
An increase of an increase in ranked play levels. Moving on, we need to hurry up on the news. TechRaptor has an article, Sony sheds lights on the PS5 peripheral compatibility. I've also seen some rumors that you might be able to slide off the white parts of this PlayStation 5, and they might sell other pieces of plastic to replace it. Although, in all fairness, why not just a vinyl wrap or a skin that you would put on the white parts instead of replacing it completely? Yeah, it doesn't matter. I said on one point that I didn't think cockroaches were like native to Japan, and they may not be native to Japan, but they apparently are very much there. I was wrong about that. So with that new understanding, there is a there is a risk of the PlayStation 5 or any new console becoming a hotbed for insects and cockroaches to crawl into. And I'm not sure if the cockroaches in Japan are the more small baby cockroach variety that often are like a millimeter long, or if they are more the giant variety that are about, I would say you could get 2 to 3 inches on them. So, yeah, I would guess in my experience, I've seen the smaller variety of cockroaches and the baby variety of cockroaches, which honestly those baby ones may just grow into the bigger ones for all I know. But they tend to be more prevalent in places near oceans, lakes, where there's higher humidity and more moisture. And that is certainly what I've heard, is that the cockroaches, whatever they actually look like in Japan, are so adept to the environments that they are just everywhere, even knowing that the Japanese tend to be fairly obsessive. They do tend to be fairly obsessive about having a high level of cleanliness, which does kind of make it odd that they'd let insects in their houses without bug bombing their houses like crazy. Moving on back to what we were talking about, though. What peripherals will work or won't? Apparently this, let's see. There'll be a case-by-case basis. Here's some PS peripherals that will definitely work on the PS5. Especially peripherals as officially licensed, such as officially licensed racing wheels, arcade sticks, fight sticks, will work with PS5 games and support PS4 games. Platinum and Gold wireless headsets, as well as third-party USB and audio jack options, will work for the PS5, although the headset companion app won't. PlayStation Move and PlayStation VR aim controllers will work with the supported PSVR games, and the PlayStation camera will work for supported PlayStation VR cameras. It will require an adapter that Sony will provide at no extra cost to PSVR users. What won't work, however, apparently, is PlayStation 4 controllers. Let's see. Which, that's probably a cash grab more than anything. But that does seem to be where it's gonna boil down to, is they're not.
Welcome to the city of nightmares and despair.
Not gonna support PlayStation 4 controllers. Let's do this, and then do this.
Embraced by the earth.
Put this on the field.
Let's have a look-see.
And attack here. Think we're good. Meanwhile, I guess to come off sounding like a as an Xbox fanboy, there's no indication whatsoever that the that the Xbox controllers for the Xbox One won't work on the Xbox Series X. We may find out that they actually don't. There's just been no indication that that would be the case.
How dare you!
But yeah, the full thing here says the PlayStation 4 controller will work with supported PlayStation 4 games, meaning you'll be able to use the DualShock 4 to play backwards compatible games. However, you won't be able to use it for PlayStation 5 games. This is because PlayStation 5 games should take advantage of the new capabilities of the platform. I think also inherently you can realize that they spent a lot of development investing in the Bluetooth connectivity protocol when they very well shouldn't have. And they're probably now connecting with a new version of the Bluetooth connectivity, which Bluetooth is still just like a nightmare. Even though like Bluetooth itself has been abandoned and replaced with Bluetooth Low Energy, it still is not to a point where it actually works and actually does the thing it should do. It is a great example of there not being a strong standards board enforcing some kind of standards and just letting far too many companies and far too many cooks in the kitchen. So did we fall all the way down? Nope. Still have 43 to do. Meanwhile, only mission at the moment would be to win 3 matches ranked, unranked, or arena. And since we just played everything in ranked and got nowhere, let's try unranked. Let's see. Moving on, Ubisoft exec Tommy Francois departs after misconduct allegations. I don't think we need to go in super detail here. This is just another domino to fall. What do you have as a company after something like this happens, though? Like what? At what state is your company after so many accusations happened? Like, I worked at a job where there was no major accusation, but one of the low managers that honestly I don't even think they were managers in the long run. I think they were stupid advisors, to steal a phrase from John Taffer, like in the fact that they had no authority to actually hire and fire or do anything like that. But yeah, one of these lower managers died in a tragic accident, and the company definitely was different after that. It was severely affected by it. People were severely affected by it, and before that point there was a slightly higher manager who had quit the job and stopped working there, and they didn't replace him, so that also certainly affected the company too, to be somewhat rudderless or remotely being managed by somebody who clearly didn't care. And that definitely was the case, is that there were all the higher managers were in other offices that had to fly in to have any kind of meeting or remote conference into any kind of meeting, and because of that they definitely were not mentally present or particularly mentally invested in that office. Not that working out of a headquarters office inherently means you're going to get treated better, but there's a small chance and likelihood of that.
I'm gonna rest for a bit.
Like that, there is something to be said about if the owner of a company lives in the same place and goes to the same office as you, they're going to be fairly lazy and not want to move that main office, so they will give more credence to ensuring people in general at that office stay employed, where if you're in a remote office that is hundreds of miles away, that's an easy discussion to just sign off on paper shutting down that office, because it doesn't affect the people in charge and the people making those decisions. Anyways, moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Servants of a Harvest Wish, which looks like it's a Toho game, although I might be getting a bit of a Chinese vibe in that it seems like there's kind of a lot of text here. It's free, which also is oddly weird, but it's English and Japanese. There definitely is something weird about how the shoot 'em up here is on the side. There's just a ton of text. Looks like a Toho game, but I don't think this is the Toho developers. Although I think half of the Toho games are not from the people who originally made the original Toho game. Let's see.
You're done for.
Can we do this in a way?
Just don't.
See. Next we have a game on Steam called Automation, which is tagged as a puzzle game. And to me, looks like it might be an asset flip 3D game with some kind of internal 2D, 2.5D platforming, but it's dark screenshots syndrome for those two images. So I'm not really seeing a game here.
Humility quells pride.
Now is
Yeah,
the time.
$7.99. English full audio. I can't even see a reason why I'd put this on the follow list, unfortunately. It does kind of feel like a Wall-E game, but honestly I don't know how you make a video game around the story of Wall-E, a robot left on Earth to clean up all the garbage, or just left on Earth to be abandoned. To there.
What arrogance.
And then we can put that on the
I
field.
live by the sword.
Put that on the field.
Play.
We could evolve this
It won't be long now.
to do this.
So yeah.
Next we have a game on Steam called Quarters of Their Memories, which looks like a visual novel murder mystery. It feels like it's a bit of a Western animation, but it doesn't look terrible. Like, these definitely are not doing the Moe art style. But it looks like there might be a game here. $2.99 is a little cheap for a visual novel. English and Russian is a little weird. I guess at a certain point the question would be how many of these really short visual novel games are really worth covering. 2 runs, True Ending doesn't open right now, so it's apparently unfinished also. Let's see, and nothing is being reviewed in English. I guess I can put that on the fall list, but I definitely do need to do some soul searching as far as should I waste my time even thinking for a second that it's worth the time to
This ends here.
to cover a visual novel that's going to be super short, because even if I did cover only 5 like 2-hour visual novels, that is 10 hours that probably would have been better suited in playing something like Clannad, one of the like best of the best visual novels that are probably 60 to 100 to 200 hours of content.
Whoa, you're strong.
I still really haven't figured out a strategy that there. I should think if there is a different strategy as far as covering visual novels, that where I could potentially cover a chapter, take a break of a month, and come back to it after that. I don't think that would work, though. I'd just forget everything. I can't pay attention enough and remember things to even take a few days break, let alone a month. If the story itself was written in such a way so it recapped you, maybe at that point it would make sense, but even then, there's just a high chance of me getting bored and never coming back to a visual novel if that's it. Even doing the main story in Shadowverse is just too much visual novel-y style of gameplay, and I am often getting bored and not paying attention. Next, we have a game on Steam called Blue Beat, which is tagged as a farming sim. Unfortunately, it looks like it's an asset flip game. There is something interesting in the fact that you're a witch that can like fly. They did show that in this trailer, but yeah, here they're flying.
Nice to see you.
But yeah, there's no real game
What
here.
should I do?
Oh, it's my turn.
Let's speed things up. Too slow.
Ow!
I would say Shadowverse's emotes probably are going to be more effective against me to make me come back and pay attention to the game until I've just learned to completely ignore the emotes. Which, it's kind of hard to ignore the emotes when there are other leaders that have other voice lines. So, it isn't just that there are 8 leaders with 8 voice lines, or maybe 8 leaders with 3 different voice lines. It's really closer to there's 20 to 30 different leaders with 3 or 4 voice lines.
Sword. Too slow.
Do this.
This is our way out. No one gets past me.
TechRaptor has an article here. Cyberpunk RPG Game Deck DEC has a cringeworthy sex obsession, which is interesting. Game Deck was a Kickstarter from Anshar Studios. Is this a tabletop game? No, it looks like it's a PC game. They say it's an interesting but tired setting, which is a terrible thing to say about Cyberpunk, as Cyberpunk 2077 is potentially going to be available fairly soon. That would be weird, certainly, if it turned out by the time Cyberpunk 2077 came out, people were tired of hearing about Cyberpunk.
I'm coming for
There is a chance of that happening. It's not guaranteed, but if a bunch of companies beat CD Projekt Red to the pass and make clones of that game, or games that are somewhat similar. And I think CD Projekt Red probably will put a decent amount of like sex-oriented content in CD Projekt Red, because remember that first trailer was the kind of slow pan in bullet time around a good-looking cyberpunk robot lady who is being shot and by the police, and her arm had like spread out into a big big selection of like metallic claws. They have not used that teaser trailer since then, and it's been much more around focusing on characters that actually are going to play a big part in the story. But they also have said in the development of Cyberpunk that there will be ways to redefine yourself and modify your body in many different ways, which will probably include like being able to change your sex organs.
My lord.
You wouldn't.
You beckon.
Let's see.
I live by the sword.
Don't call me short. How much is in it for me?
So here we have, continuing as far as this review, an interesting but tired setting. And here I have a picture. This was the 4th individual prostitute I had to proposition to progress the plot. So, okay. Seems like in Game Deck you are doing business with the world's oldest profession. Game Deck has a few strengths to discuss. The artwork is an intriguing one. Do they have a review here? In practice, most of my time with Game Deck was just clicking through every possible option in each dialogue tree to try and progress the story. And here you have another character. This would be funny if this was a Kickstarter game that was going to be like a Nutaku game or an adult game, and then they said, well, actually, let's see if we can make more money by not going extreme with it and selling it as an adult game. I don't know who this guy is. Like, he's new, it seems.
How much is in it for me?
Darn it. I've lost again. So he ends it saying, I want to know if Kickstarter backers are happy with what the product has become, or if they're going to feel misled and cheated. Overall, the basic RPG aspects of Game Deck could have delivered a cyberpunk experience similar to Disco Elysium, which already exists. So, like, do you want more of the same, or do you want something different in someone else's artistic creation? Although maybe, in fairness, Kickstarter people don't want someone else's artistic creation. They want what they're promised, regardless if what they were promised evolves or wasn't that good to start with in the first place. Instead, it chose to hone in on cringeworthy sex sequences, domination sequences, awkward flirtations, and frankly disgusting treatment of women. To be blunt, I'm appalled by Game Deck. If you're looking for a non-anime hentai game, well then, I've got the thing for you. If you're looking for a cyberpunk RPG, well, Cyberpunk 2077 is just around the corner. You can wait. Yeah, it does kind of feel like that from the screenshots that they're showing. But on the other hand, that might very well have been what people were looking for. I don't know if Kickstarter would have any problem coming out and just saying that that's what the game is going to be. Like, does Kickstarter care if you said, I'm just going to make an adult game with adult content, or do they say, take that to OnlyFans or take that somewhere else? We know PayPal and Patreon don't like anything that is adult in nature. But I'm not sure Kickstarter or Indiegogo have those same rules. And in a funny way, I kind of want to see Game Deck now. Like, this has caught my interest, and I'm not sure I don't just believe that this is a case of an SJW new writer being added to TechRaptor, which TechRaptor is not consistent at all as far as who is in charge of writing. You kind of have to learn, and it's sometimes very hard to learn the staff writers and who they are and where their tastes lie. And at a certain point, this might be a case where game deck was assigned to the wrong person. See, I'm looking at the game here on Steam, and we don't see anything here labeled as like sexual content or nudity or anything like that. The trailer I'm being shown doesn't seem like it's doing anything. Okay, we're in a stripper bar in that scene, and then it jumps to another scene. Seems like there's a lot going on here. And I don't know if it's a fair statement to say, well, you have to just click all of the all the dialogue options to progress the story. That's true for every RPG. Like, that's not fair at all. There's a skill tree that I didn't see him mention, but I skimmed this article in all fairness. Yeah. Every single screenshot here is not the screenshots that the TechRaptor article person did. This is not out yet, but I'm gonna put this on the follow list because I'd like to see if that review has any truth to it or not. And this is from Anshar Studios, which also made a game called Detached, which was mixed. That was it. It's like a VR mixed reviewed immersive flying sim game. So they are doing something different. Yeah. I would say there is kind of a problem with writing an article like this because it does come off as like an opinionated piece instead of an objective review. Like, when you have a title here calling it cringeworthy, that's an opinion. Saying it has a sex obsession is a little bit more of an opinion than you would want to do as you try to be more of an objective reviewer. And then starting "this is not what I signed up for." It does just kind of put you on this even before you get into like the first paragraph, you're on this footing where you're just kind of complaining, instead of saying, all right, this game has this content in it. I think this content will satisfy this type of audience. I think this content does have an audience. There are sometimes rare occasions, and they should be extremely rare, where you say there absolutely is no audience for this content, or the audience of for this content is an audience of one, and that's the creator of the game. But I think particularly when reviewing a game, you should probably say something you don't like something once, and then maybe mention that same thing that you don't like is still in the game 2 or 3 times, and then you just leave it on the table and move on to the next thing. Well, I would say this article seems to have in every paragraph only this talking about it, which at a certain point makes the reviewer seem like he's obsessed about that element. And if that was the only element, that would be hard to prove and hard to show, but I don't think it is the only element. and we certainly see this with SJWs all the time, is that they have no interest whatsoever about talking about anything other than the thing that triggers them, and thus they're really not adding anything to the conversation because all they're doing is screaming that they're triggered over and over again. And you see that with like Jim Sterling and his coverage of Ubisoft. Is like at a certain point it just boils down to childish repetition. He's like, Ubisoft did these things. Yeah, you've said it, we've heard it. Saying it maybe once at the beginning of your video is fine, particularly if you're only doing one video when there was actual new news or relevancy to say. But when you look over the years of what Jim Sterling's content is, it's literally he gets triggered by something, he gets upset by something, he creates some drama, or some drama is created and he gets upset by it, and then he just milks that over and over and over again. The digital homicide thing, like, totally, the original digital homicide video, fine, talk about it. The abuse of the DMCA, fine, talk about it. After that point, just let the lawyers settle it out. That's what he had to do anyways.
You've won this one.
Just get away from somebody who's just gonna spam the emotes. But he literally milked digital homicide, Jim Sterling did, for like a year, and he still on occasion brings it up. The whole Randy Pitchford lied to me thing, like, sure, Randy Pitchford lied, but you don't need to bring it up when there's kind of no new reason to bring it up.
This one's for my family.
Prepare for defeat.
So yeah, there's like, I often say I go on rants, and I often recognize that in my Monday, Wednesday, and Friday streams I just talk about the same thing, but I think I do a very good job of mostly leaving that stuff out of the pre-recorded reviews of games. If anything, these live streams are where I try to just burn it out of my system and get it out. But yeah. But I know sometimes I'm just banging a drum on some point that's been banged 100 times before, and I see it in myself, and perhaps I need a little bit more self-control so that I could just stop talking about certain things. Although at a certain point some things do need to be talked about over and over again because nothing's been improved and nothing's been changed. And certainly there are people that just don't want to hear it, so they will use that against you and say, why don't you just drop it? Why don't you just stop talking about it? And if you're passionate about something, maybe you don't. If something's important. Yeah. So that pretty much cuts both ways. Moving on, back to video game news though. We have this article from like pressstart.com.au that says Telstra is telling customers that Xbox Series X pre-orders are opening soon. Telstra must be some kind of shopping portal in Australia, which frankly that is not really a good source. Plenty of stores just kind of make up release dates for products and tell people that pre-ordering should be happening soon because it doesn't hurt them at all to lie. They literally just want your money, so of course it's no skin off their teeth if they get you to pre-order something that's not going to be out for a year.
I'm still hungry.
And yeah, I imagine the Xbox Series X pre-orders would be starting soon. We really don't have that much time, like until November and Black Friday and all of that. And if the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X are not out by Black Friday, then they might as well not be out at all this year. They should wait until next Black Friday. Let's see.
Calamity is born again!
See. Moving on, we have a game on Steam called P-War, which I guess is urine. I'm seeing some yellowish like elements. So it seems like this is a troll game. Play P Superman and destroy the city and forest, destroy everything in your sight. This is $1.69. English, Russian, Chinese, and Japanese. Allegedly full audio for all. This is clearly just an asset flip garbage game. So this one would have ward. This one would do 6. So I should do this. And then I should do this.
That was fun!
And in the turn, I didn't heavily curate the games that came out today, which explains things like the Maze Escaper, which is that pre-bought asset of parkour elements, and that pre-bought asset of a maze generator. Maybe it doesn't even have parkour elements. Maybe these bodies are just floating in the air or flipping. Yeah, they seem to really not have parkour. They seem to just have ragdoll elements. And you're blowing them up somehow. This is $16.99, which is way too expensive with a bunch of languages and a third-party EULA. Just like total garbage.
I am the guardian of the sky.
It won't be long now.
Dawn, don't.
I'm still hungry.
Just go and hit that.
Wait, that's it?
And then the turn. Let's see. Next we have a game on Steam called Dragon Blaze, which is tagged as a shoot 'em up game. Now, I generally like when there's something on the sides of shoot 'em ups, but I would say there's perhaps having edge-to-edge animation is not the best way to do that, and you should have a bit of a border and maybe some blackness so you can zone out the edges if you're not interested in it. And then when it's just absolutely nothing on the sides, that's a bit confusing. Otherwise, it does just kind of look like a shoot 'em up. $9.99, English and Japanese. Still not really in a position where I'd want to play any of these.
Oppose me and burn.
That was fun!
Let's keep on moving. I have too many games open, frankly. I should be wrapping up about now. I'd love to get these streams down to like an hour and a half. That would be great. I'm about to fall asleep again. I felt like I was almost to the point where I had adjusted my sleep schedule back to sleeping just once per 24 hours. But I'm not sure I'm actually at that point. Here we have a game called Apple Hopper. It looks like a student project. It's pointless. It's early access for no reason. It's English. It's selling for 59 cents. I have about 2 pages on the Steam Marketplace of things for sale, and I'm hoping, I just checked it like earlier today, I'm hoping that that does open up the possibility of it, everything that I have to sell and want to sell, selling fairly quickly. If not, I'd have to turn it all into sacks of gem and hope that I can sell the sacks of gems. Having nearly $10 in store credit is itching a hole in my pocket, certainly on Steam, and I need to be very careful to not just spend that money. Particularly playing Shadowverse, since this is a Steam game, it would be very easy. I don't have to type in any new credit card to add $80 worth of premium currency into this game, which is not what I would want to have happen.
I only did what I had to.
Finally, we got a single victory. So we'll ride that victory and play the same card again, same deck. Next we have a game on Steam called Clash Memory Game, which is just memory, and maybe some Outrun too. That's a weird competition. I don't think so. I think this is probably just an image you get at the end of each level of playing memory. And clearly this is a Russian low effort game for 59 cents.
Mother, father, come on.
Yeah. It once again gets back to that thought. If Valve is not just going to be this libertarian open marketplace where anyone can sell anything, and they are going to curate things, which they are, censoring / curating, however you want to put it, some things, we know they are. Why aren't they censoring / curating match games? Like, there's zero need for yet another match game, and there is an argument, at least, that people who were first to market maybe do deserve to get some exclusivity on the storefront. Because at the very least, the people that would have been first to market, the first person to ever put a match game on Steam, has been doing business with Steam for a while now. And you know that they don't, they aren't just copying someone else, or even though they probably were originally, but you also know that they're not a fly-by-night person. Just the financials of it. Like, if 10 years ago somebody put a match game, a match card game on Steam, and they've been getting money and getting that money deposited into their bank, well, that's a business relationship that Valve has had with that company. So why establish yet another business relationship for effectively the exact same game with somebody who might turn out to be a problem? If I'm having a good experience doing business with a plumber, for instance, which that sounds almost like fantasy, but if I have a good plumber, I like that plumber, I've been using that plumber for 10 years and he's never given me a bit of trouble, why would I go and find a new plumber? Or why would I hire a second plumber? Moving on, we have a game called Star Puzzle, which is just a tile puzzle game. And again, it looks like a Russian low effort game. Early access, 59 cents, labeled English only. I'm assuming these are Russian games because they have Russian writing on them, regardless of whether they label themselves as being Russian games or not.
How much is in it for me?
Be gone.
I better get iron my fair share.
Wait, that's it?
Let's just keep on burning through all this. This is gonna take forever. Next we have Pizza Bike Rider, which, again, while it does seem like it has a bit more visual polish to it. I think this probably is a bit of an infinite runner game, and I don't think there's anything super interesting here. Now, I don't think you could call this a game where you're doing someone's job, even though this probably is a job. It's not an infinite runner even. It's just kind of a racing game. I don't know how many people deliver pizzas off the back of a bike in at least the United States. Maybe that happens in other countries still. This is tagged as a visual novel and a simulation in a casual game, 59 cents. Whole bunch of languages, all allegedly with full audio. Yeah, there's nothing there, regardless.
Light upon the land.
If you were going to make a racing game in general, I guess, and one of the characters was going to be riding a motorcycle and have a pizza delivery box on the back of it, that would be like an interesting skin. Or if you were going to try and do like a modern take on Paperboy, there might be something to that idea also, where you're riding on a motorcycle instead of a bicycle, and you're throwing the pizzas instead of throwing the papers to people's houses. There might be something to that. Now, I think realistically, with perhaps the exception of the arcade version of Paperboy, almost every console version of the Paperboy wasn't actually good. So you run into an issue there where
How much is in it for me?
you kind of don't
It won't be long now.
don't have a great
Better get a
basis to create a good game based off that concept. Next, we have a game on Steam called Wick, which I don't think is attempting to be name confusion for John Wick. It looks to me like you're playing as a candle, which does inherently cause a lot of dark screenshot syndrome. So they're labeling it kind of as like a stealth game, and you light other candles. There might be an idea of trying to run around and light all the candles, but what is the enemy? What is the challenge there? It does seem like it's just playing with the idea of light and darkness. And I'm not seeing any shadows move. There's some bats flying around, so maybe bats irritate them, and then there's some kind of ghost creature. It's free. Join Jean Wick in the quest. Wick was developed by Studio Whip, a group of students in Florida Interactive Academy, the FIEA. Never heard of that one, but it is a student project. So yeah, it's free. I'll put it on the wish list, and we'll see. We'll see what happens there if I ever get around to actually playing it.
I am the guardian of the sky.
Interesting. But yeah, it definitely seems like Wick is trying to have some name confusion as a student project. That should have probably been addressed by the professor to say, hey, I know you think this is funny and all, and this can be an internal code name, but I need you to write a better name for the project so we can list it. Plus, frankly, if you were going to really be working when you are really working in the video game industry, you're not going to be allowed to do kind of joke names like this, because you need to be thinking about what the actual name of the game is going to be, even if that is just the advertisement department's job in the long run. You need to bring them ideas at the very least that are useful, and not potentially be in this
That was fun.
point where you would rebel against a name change to your game because you've fallen in love with a name that couldn't ever be used. TechRaptor has a review here for Beyond the Steel Sky, which frankly puts them at about 1 review a week at this point, which seems to be about average for any video game site right about now. Apparently there are some major differences versus playing iPad Pro versus an iPhone 11 Pro, in that the images are squished and zoomed differently. Let's see. They give it an 8.0. That's good news. They say Beyond the Steel Sky is might be one of the best examples of a point-and-click adventure in the last few years, with pros being impressive visuals on iPhone, great writing and world building, and an exceptional soundtrack. Cons or controls can be wonky depending on the platform, and the puzzles can be difficult. Beneath a Steel Sky, the game that predates this by a very long time, also has some pretty difficult puzzles, and frankly, point-and-click adventure games in general have some pretty difficult puzzles. So, yeah. That's not super surprising. Xbox Wire has an article here. A new Microsoft Store experience is coming to Xbox Insiders. So once again, they're redoing their Microsoft Store. And yeah, they pretty much are going for kind of like a Netflix attempt with a lot of tiles all over the place. They seem to love the tiles, but as you look here, it is very much similar to Netflix, which, yeah, if you can't think of anything better, steal, and that does seem like what they've embraced there. It's just kind of steal the layout of Netflix. User interface for storefronts and sites are constantly in this fight of tall, wide arguments. Do you want to make your site make sense when you're going vertically tall or horizontally wide? Or do you want some things to go vertically and then some things to go wide, then some things to go vertically and then some things to go wide? And you can just keep on doing that forever. I've never seen anybody try to make a user interface diagonal. Might be something to that idea, but that would be very hard. Or three-dimensional. The main complaint I have about the Netflix interface is that getting back to your list and organizing your list is impossible in most apps. And Netflix does have a tendency to ever increasingly try and promote the things that they're trying to promote. Like, I watched the Umbrella Academy season 2 while videos were uploading and I was doing other things, and it's kind of sucky, not amazingly great. I don't think the comic book that Umbrella Academy is based on is particularly great. I think all of the characters are better in the second season, but I still feel like, and I may never mention this to anybody out on this channel, is that I feel like season 1 Ellen Page really showed that she can't really act, and in season 2 Ellen Page kind of showed that she apparently refuses to act much or around certain other actors in the show. So very often she is just not in the same room with some people, and when she is in the same room with people, she's not doing a lot of emoting or acting. And she also has like kind of just a terrible haircut, which is a very small criticism, and it's more of a criticism on the hair department. But she's really got like a 5 head of just no bangs, nothing to show. To hide a very large exposed forehead.
You beckoned.
And so, and then the story in general for the second season, much like the first season, was very slow to get to the events that were actually occurring. It was even slower in the second season than the first season. And then, so you get this kind of slow burn for the vast majority of the episodes. Then you get this rushed ending that you really couldn't have seen coming, even if you had tried. So the pacing just feels very off. And you don't get really any backstory for any of the kids, and you don't get any of the kids from the Umbrella Academy. Like, their child versions of them are completely written out. They probably aged out of being on the show. I would say there is kind of a combined issue with both Lock and Key and Umbrella Academy being on Netflix, and the fact that they're trying to do these increasingly niche nerd products, and Netflix doesn't inherently seem to be able to steer those ships. They know how to throw money at things and just hope that it gets them some views, but they're really not controlling it enough to ensure that there's a good product at the end of the day. I will say both season 1 and season 2 of Umbrella Academy end on a cliffhanger, but not enough of a cliffhanger that it doesn't feel like you got some sort of rush solution to the current fight in the current issue for that season. But yeah, I hate to make the argument that Netflix should give more notes and interfere more, but I think Netflix should probably be closer to a regular TV production company or movie production company, and have some creative director somewhere, head of creative directions. They give some notes and keeps things on track a little bit more, and doesn't let people just do whatever they want to do, because there's a lot of that, and there's increasingly a lot of people just being allowed to make whatever art content they want to make, even though it doesn't have any broad appeal or sellability or entertainment value to the vast majority of people watching it. And then they cancel the things people do like just because, again, there's not a good person steering the ship. So yeah, I'd like to see Netflix improve. That being said, it looks to me like Peacock is just becoming yet another competitor, and the CBS All Access, I think, might be on the verge of failing from the rumors I'm hearing, which, not super surprised there. And nobody really has any money for anything. IGW has been self-funding Winona Earp on Sci-Fi Channel, so many years later, yet a new season of it is happening. But they lie there. They straight up lie and say it's the fans that brought it back. That's not the case at all. IGW has been desperate, just absolutely desperate to
I did it! I won!
yeah, I got a lucky victory there. the IGW has been desperate to make Winona Earp successful, and so they've been funding that TV series pretty much from the word go. Meanwhile, Sci-Fi Channel is showing, like, I guess HD versions of Xena and labeling them new, and they've got an Adult Swim thing they just started doing, which is kind of ridiculous too. Like, the state of TV in general is going to be, it is abysmal right now. It's going to be like 10 times worse in the next year or two, to the point where only insane people are going to even be paying for cable TV. It would be interesting if this was a point where people started shutting down cable channels and just saying, you know what, we don't need FXX. Let's put everything we've got from FXX back on Fox. We don't need the Oprah Winfrey Network. That certainly would explain where the G4 is coming back idea could be coming from. Instead of having the Esquire Network, which wasn't going to be successful, bring it back to G4. You could certainly get rid of Paramount Network and take the 2 shows they have and put it on something else. If people eventually lose interest in the World WWE Wrestling, then you could recover potentially 6 hours a week or more from wrestling events. If there's no sports, you're recovering lots and lots of hours a week in which you could have primetime shows air. Or you could convert a lot of things, a lot of primetime shows, just to streaming services, whether that's Netflix or Hulu or just YouTube. Let's see. Well, I guess I gotta play it.
Tasty.
Do that. Moving on, TechCraft has an article, Pokey, on preserving your favorite Flash games. So there's yet another group, trying to preserve Flash games.
What a shame.
In a funny way, there's about 5 or 6 people trying to preserve Flash games and keep them still working.
I'm so hungry.
Which at a certain point, I think the argument is going to be that a lot of these companies are just going to completely give up on preserving Flash games and say, look, there's no real audience here. There's no reason to do it. The Wayback Machine will have those files, and anybody could install Windows 95 and Flash in a sandbox mode and have them run, and that's pretty much how any of these services are probably going to work, is that it will just be a sandboxed image of something running, probably not on Windows 95, but something on like Windows 7 would probably be the latest with the latest version of Flash.
Guess it's my turn to do field work.
I will fulfill my vow.
I'm talking too much about TV and not enough about the video games, which is causing me not to get through these things very fast. Here we have a game on Steam called The Holy City, which may not be a game, but a VR experience of, I assume, Jerusalem? Like, it's a documentary experience with some interactivity and what looks like, in my opinion, just straight up magic. There's a certain point where it is not ethical to add to a religion, and I think they are probably crossing this point. And frankly, it is a little dangerous to have this subject matter. It'd be much safer if you were going to make a game where you were walking around a holy city of an alien society and there was all kinds of magical devices and elements happening.
Sorry.
So yeah, I don't know if this is propaganda or what, or if it's just kind of like poorly thought out experience. $19.99 English full audio. I'd like to see the reviews on this. I'd like to see how people respond to it. I wouldn't say gamers are inherently the most like dogmatic in religion. Like Assassin's Creed is a pretty good argument against that. But also the one thing we really didn't run into ever in Assassin's Creed was them mentioning like Jesus. They didn't touch Jesus. They didn't really touch God so much. There's an inherent implication that Jesus and God in the Bible aren't likely to be what they say they are, but it's not directly touched upon, certainly. Alright, well, I got my daily quest of 3 unranked victories, which is just like so incredibly difficult to pull off. And this will restart again in 2 hours. And then each of these I've somewhat scheduled so that they will restart about the same time. And then we get some more cards. So then that does just leave us with playing some ranked rotation. Let's just start there. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if there's much more to say than, yeah, Assassin's Creed in its first, like the first Assassin's Creed game, was probably the closest to being involved around Jerusalem, and then Adam and Eve and all of that was the first game. And then sure, you're fighting the Borgias, and one of the Borgias becomes the Pope, and there's some corruption in the Vatican, and secrets hidden in the basement of the Vatican. But yeah. There's definitely danger in that. I would not touch Jerusalem as a city. I would not touch all of the history and conflict that goes around that. There's far too many either rampantly, blatantly dogmatic people that jump into conversations when you mention Jerusalem, or state actors that jump into conversations, and apologetics that get put out around Jerusalem. So I really wouldn't want to play a game based on that, because there'd just be a ridiculous amount of irritating comments on all the videos. The Myst soundtracks were pulled and then re-released by the original composer, I think is what happened. I specifically wouldn't want to buy the Myst soundtracks. I think Myst's music is absolutely perfect for background music when playing the Myst games, but there's basically no song that I hear as far as the video game soundtracks, the songs that actually are in the game. There's nothing there that I would want to listen to outside of playing Myst. And most people who play Myst have played it long enough to have heard all the music for more than enough time. Let's see, can I do this? Can banish this one, which is fine, but he's just going to use this to kill that. Next, we have a game on Steam called Natural Stories, which looks like it's an asset flip survival game. It says take photos, get rewards, and unlock new animals in your nursery. Well, that sounds like a Pokemon Snap game type thing, but this game looks nothing like that. In fact, it looks poorly animated and dark most of the time. You are, I guess, taking photos. A first-person photography game, early access for $6.49, English and Russian. I'm gonna give this one a lot of benefit of the doubt. And it does have an interesting idea, because normally if you're gonna have a game where deer are running around, there's a high chance it's gonna be a deer hunting simulator game. So by sidestepping that idea and instead having a photography game, that's an interesting attempt at non-violence. But one of the things that made Pokemon Snap really work, and there is rumors that there's going to be a new Pokemon Snap game, is the fact that Pokemon Snap was very scripted and very on rails. So a good player would only have to go through each level maybe a dozen times before they've gotten pretty good pictures and done everything there really is to do in the game. There's also rumors that there's another Pokemon Snap in development. I may have just said that. Also, I do believe Niantic, the creators of Pokemon Go, donated some money to either a Black Lives Matter or an LGBT organization, which, yeah, okay, fine. Either way, like that's pretty much to be expected. See, Gamatsu has an article here. Halo Infinite multiplayer is going to be free to play, support 120 frames per second on the Xbox Series X. So Microsoft has confirmed the rumors to be accurate. It certainly does put Halo in a different perspective now, because it basically is an admittance that Halo does not have the selling power that it once did, because there were, in the original Xbox and in the 360 era, it was Halo that was selling systems. It was Halo that people were paying $60 to just play the multiplayer of. So at best, you're hoping, Microsoft, I guess, is hoping that the free-to-play version of Halo Infinite will sell systems and get people to buy the Xbox Series X. But they're clearly giving up the ability to sell the game to people who are just going to play the multiplayer, who would be in the past willing to actually make that payment. 120 frames per second doesn't mean too much, frankly, because you'd have to have a monitor that can actually handle 120 frames per second. So that's a bit of a misnomer. These were both rumors that Microsoft has confirmed. Let's see. Next, we have a game on Steam called Soul 705, which I feel like I've seen other Soul games with a number after it. This does look like it's a point-and-click adventure game. Looks like it might be a little bit comedic. Doesn't look terribly animated. Let's see. Either I'm thinking of a different game, or I saw this game in early access and now it's out of early access. It's $10.99, English full audio with a bunch of other languages. So I'll put this on the follow list. I'm a sucker for point and click adventures. We'll see what people have to say about it. I can see the beginning of the end, but I'm not there yet, certainly. It's quite a way. I retweeted this. The National Video Game Museum in, oh, I forget where it is, North Dallas, had someone make a Doom 2 mod to show, let's see if we can show it, show a layout of what the National Video Game Museum is. So here on the right, there's video of the real world of the museum, and here on the left is the museum. I may certainly get around to actually installing this and playing it, because I am very interested to see how much space they have and how much space they and how much stuff they have. It's the National Video Game Museum is not super new. It's maybe 7 years old, so there definitely is a level of growth it can have. I think they've moved once to a newer location, so
Rings of light, show your might. Such merciless fighting. Open your eyes.
but yeah, slightly interesting idea, at least, since everybody can't actually go to the museum, bring the museum to them. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see a lot of that happen just in general, where museums digitize a lot of their experience to the point where maybe they don't need janitors and curators and docents and people. Maybe they don't need to pay for the electricity for the lights and the air conditioning. Maybe museums start becoming more of a, we rented out a virtual space, we staged everything and then 3D scanned it for a VR experience, and then we put everything back into storage, and there actually is no way for anybody to actually go see the Mona Lisa, which in all honesty, frankly, for the Mona Lisa, since it is so popular, it's always crowded from what I hear, and kind of like a terrible experience to try and go see.
I will save you no matter the cost.
On the other hand, I think they're fairly adamant about trying to make people pay to go see the Mona Lisa when it should probably just be public domain, and high-res images should just be available for everybody to see and use. Next we have a game called Seven Roses, A Darkness Rises. This is a hidden object game from HH Games, which we really haven't been seeing a lot of hidden object games lately. $4.24. There's been a small bit of curation, but not a lot. Like maybe I skipped one hidden object game in the last month from like Big Fish Games. It does seem like you lose less points the closer and closer you get down to 1200 points. Let's just call it a day as far as all of that, though. As far as playing cards, and let's just finish what I've got to show. I've got a lot, but I'm tired. I am literally tired of playing multiplayer, and I'm very, very tired of losing. If we want to just look here, there's a couple wins and then a long list of losses, then one win, then a long list of losses, then one win. and then a couple more losses. And that can be also contextualized here with me in ranked having only 2 victories for this class, 1 for each of these classes, 3 for Shadowcraft, 4 for Havencraft, 1 for Prolocraft, and I've not gotten a single victory in ranked for Bloodcraft, which, yeah, it kind of sucks. I probably should play Unlimited at some point and just get this up to D0, and that might just give us some kind of reward every month just by having it at D0. I hadn't considered that, but that might be the case. So yeah, it might benefit me a little bit to do that. Moving on, No Tech Raptor has an article. Discord communities launches as it expands outside of gamings. Discord is trying to do something. I don't know exactly what though. They say better discoverability and new admin tools. I don't know if anybody really cares about Discord anymore. It is fine, and I imagine some people still work with it, but very quickly, instead of Discord becoming the default place where you could chat and video chat with students, Zoom, a product I had never even heard of before, became the default. And so it feels like Zoom or Microsoft Teams, another product I hadn't really heard much about, would and could easily replace all the functionality of what Discord is offering. Although maybe Discord is trying to be more of a forum management software with no website, which then really hurts the opportunity to compete against something like Reddit. Like, I would much prefer, if instead of trying to make a Discord community and have that succeed, I would much prefer to just have a public forum on my own website, or have a competitor to Reddit website. Next we have a game on Steam here that's just a bunch of Asian characters. This looks like this is a text-based game, although it's tagged as an RPG simulation game. And since it's so text-based, I kind of think it's probably a Chinese game, if I was to guess. It's free, so the price is right. Simplified Chinese. Let's see what next. We'll try and get 2 or 3 of these loaded first. Next we have a game on Steam called Robotic Learn, which looks like it might be a 3D puzzle game. It says it's a puzzle platformer. Not sure what the game really is though, so that's where something like this would really come into play, is just how much of, is this actually a good game, or is this just asset flip content? I've seen plenty of bad puzzle platforming games, and I've played quite a few of them, and they tend to kind of suck, or they tend to try to have a story and then the story sucks, and it's like, why'd you even bother to tell a story if you couldn't write it better than that? This is $2.99, English and Portuguese Brazil. I'll put it on the follow list. Next we have General War Memories, which looks like a Command and Conquer style real-time strategy game clone. Free to play with in-app purchases, English only. I wouldn't cover a free to play game, but I will give this one its credit and say it does look like it might be a game worth playing. Although I would recommend people waiting to see if there's actually a player base and if there's multiplayer here. It's labeled as an MMO, so you have to play multiplayer. So you do have that high chance of there being no people to ever play against. Next we have a game called Kabukicho Story. I guess that's how you pronounce that. It's tagged as a walking simulator. historical adventure game. Feels like it's an RPG Maker game where you play as a kabuki actor. But I don't know if that's really the case. And honestly, this may not be made with RPG Maker. This may be a different engine or something that just looks like RPG Maker. It's 59 cents and it's got a whole bunch of things that it's bundled with. See. And then here you have a bundle that says adult games not included. So 44 items for $19.98, English and Russian. That pretty much tells you that this is a low effort game. Like, let's see. Next we have a game on Steam called Hunting Moon Volume 2, which is tagged as a visual novel, interactive fiction, dating sim. Not seeing anything labeled adult content though. Is there anything else to say here? It's $1.19, which is probably too cheap. It's Chinese full audio, which probably means it's not that good as a Chinese game. It seems like this is like one of those stories where the protagonist gets a life-size robot that becomes his girlfriend that turns out to be alive. There was an anime that kind of established that as a cliche. I believe I'm thinking it was called Chobits, but I could be wrong. In fairness, Hunting Moon, Depression, and Succubus here is marked as 93% positive. So it seems like people that are playing it like their games. I'm just not sure that there's enough there to justify it. I'd also say that Hunting Moon 1 is tagged as having sexual content, nudity, so there might very well be a bait and switch there. Also, Hunting Moon 1 clearly does seem to be around a succubus girl named Lilith, not the girl in the second in volume 2. So it seems like there might be some bait and switch, just using the same title to convince people to continue buying different things. Next we have a game on Steam called Robots, Death, and Venice. I guess I should say we haven't seen any adult game today, but it is Monday. If we don't see anything by this Friday or next Friday, then I'll start to get a little concerned. But honestly, at this point, we've seen the up and down as far as whether adult games get approved on Steam come and go. It seems to be fairly common that they wait until like every 2 weeks to release a lot of them. So this is tagged as a steampunk robots and action game. Looks like there might be something to this. It's free, which is odd. So, English full audio. It's from FX Animation, Barcelona 3D and Film School. Let's see. So I think this is a student project, would be my guess. So I'm gonna assume this is a student project. Let's see if they have anything else. Nope. And it might very well be a very animated linear experience or not interactive experience at all. Next we have a game on Steam called Kingdom Carnage, which looks like it is a card-based RPG, and I would say the visuals are not particularly interesting to me, fairly repetitive and fairly ugly. It's free to play, single online PvP, third-party account, and apparently no in-app purchases, so that would be interesting as far as what the monetization model is around that. Next we have Zoo War 3x3 3 versus 3 tank online games, which is already mixed. And yeah, I have no interest in really playing a tank game, particularly a tank game against other people. This is free to play online PvP in-app purchases. Next we have a game that is just a bunch of Asian characters that is tagged as a chess. Does that say chess or does that say something else? Strategy casual, turn-based tactical. Yeah, it definitely looks like it's just asset flip characters though. Yeah. I'm not seeing anything here. It looks like a cheap Chinese game for 99 cents. And it says it's English and Chinese. And I would question the English part of that, honestly. I don't have any real reason to say this, but I decided to record a bunch of bad movies and watch them. And one of them was like Beetlejuice. And boy, is that movie weird. I don't know if you'd inherently call it a bad movie, but yeah, if it came out today, I definitely would call it a bad movie because I'd say it is tonally inconsistent in what it's trying to do and the story it's trying to tell. The first half of Beetlejuice, the movie, is just people dealing with being ghosts, and that really doesn't go anywhere. And then the second half is the ghost dealing with hiring a contractor effectively who drives them up the wall and is terrible, which is pretty much all the story is. And the movie feels like it was going to be a vehicle for Bill Murray, but Bill Murray isn't in it. I could definitely see Bill Murray playing Beetlejuice, and it's a vehicle for a lot of clay animation, which doesn't really go anywhere. It's really surprising that as a movie there was such little competition that Beetlejuice caught the minds and attention of people to the point where they made a cartoon based off of it, and that cartoon then caught the minds and attention of enough kids that 80s kids will remember Beetlejuice and think, oh yeah, I kind of like that. And definitely it has that 80s vibe of being goth before knowing what goth is. Anyways, speaking of weird things, here we have Anime Schoolgirl Dance Club, which another low effort asset flip game, which is the same old anime girl models with the same old pre-rendered animations. Like, it is super easy in Unity to buy an animation and attach it to a model and then just have that be the whole thing. This requires VR for $3.74, which is way too cheap for a VR game. And it's English full audio. I don't know why Valve, if they're going to curate anything, would let these on there. The idea of just having VR dance videos is ridiculous. And I guess maybe if you were like a extremely low effort YouTuber, if you were just like the people that were doing the chill beats to groove to, whatever that's called, you might buy a game like this and then put a bunch of stolen music on a stream on YouTube and do the lo-fi thing so you don't get content ID copyright claimed, and then it would look like there's more motion on the screen and catch more people's attention, maybe. But I haven't even seen anybody actually accomplish that or attempt that, so it clearly hasn't worked. It is a weird position, certainly. I use that phrase too often, but if you think about it and you look at just all the terrible efforts that people produce, it really does go to show how many people just kind of suck. That there's no better way to say it. Like, in their own endeavors, in the things they try to create, they are either lazy or incompetent. And it does certainly get down to the core of an issue where not everybody is good at doing, frankly, anything. Joe Rogan had a bit of a controversy, and I think I should address it somewhat. From what I've heard, Joe Rogan was by his own account probably addicted to gaming, playing like Unreal Tournament, I believe it was, for like 12 hours a day, which is a fairly heavy addiction considering how he wasn't probably accomplishing other goals and living a good, healthy life while doing that. On the other hand, it might very well have been the case for Joe Rogan that he was in between shoots as a comedian, or in between sets as a comedian, or shoots as a comedic actor. So 12 hours of Unreal Tournament might be it. There is some weirdness of being a Hollywood person where your job becomes a lot of times to go to auditions and go to interviews, and it's fairly easy to not do that. And if you're just going to be a stand-up comedian, you can kind of stop doing that and do whatever you want. Comedians, in a weird way, their job is to think of something funny, so if they're thinking and playing Unreal Tournament, there might be something to that. Unfortunately, a lot of people didn't get that, and he didn't say that, so Joe Rogan does just come off as directly attacking video games and saying they're useless, and making a very ridiculous argument that instead of playing video games, if you played video games for 3 years, you would be nowhere, whereas if you were doing jujitsu or judo, you could then, after 3 years, be an expert and have your own studio and be making money by teaching other people jujitsu or judo, which is frankly just an incredible blindness and survivor bias, as far as that many successful people have, and many people that are rich despite not really being successful have. People naturally think if they're rich and they're successful that anyone can be rich and successful. The inevitable phrase that is used that is just literally impossible and incredibly infuriating is pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And not to get too SJW here, typically this is spouted by middle class to upper class white entitled rich people that say this. They think that their success was all from them. They don't have a clue what it's like to grow up in the projects and literally have no education, no good education given to you. Incredible amounts of police abuse and institutionalized abuse, to be practically guaranteed to be at least harassed, if not arrested, by the police before the age of 18. They have no idea that. And not just the projects and minorities, they also have no idea what it's like to be to grow up in a small rural county in the middle of America, where there's, again, homeschooling, no education, no opportunity, no jobs. You're not going to become an actor. You're not going to be a stand-up comedian, because to do that would require more money than your entire family has to even get you to California. Even then, the vast majority of people that go to California fail, and that's why homelessness is so incredibly high there. Which is really just a way of saying a lot of people are just losers. And a lot of times it's just not their fault. And until you realize that, a lot of people are happy to not do anything with their life. A lot of people are not going to do anything with their life even if they're unhappy about it. And until people realize that and realize that's the case, then you just always have this internal defense in your mind to say, I'm successful, other people can be successful, thus they shouldn't do things to maybe just lessen the pain a little bit and play video games and forget about their problems for a day. No, they have to have the hustle culture. They have to be out there. They have to try it. Let me tell you, I've known people that are in the hustle culture, and the people that I'm thinking of are not successful. They think they are. They would say they are, but they are not. They are absolutely in just about as a situation as half of the lazy employees that I've known. Because a lot of times you are just a victim of circumstances, and there's literally nothing you can have. As the population goes up, this becomes more and more the situation for people. And celebrities should learn to either get perspective on how the rest of the world actually lives, particularly if you start to think about people outside of the United States. Like, some starving child in Africa is not going to be able to hustle themselves up to being as successful as Joe Rogan. And Joe Rogan himself is only successful because he's lucky. And so they shouldn't attack people for doing something that makes them happy just because you don't see it having a use. It's all right to do things that are useless. It's all right to do something just because it makes you happy. That doesn't make you a bad person. That doesn't make you a lazy person. And that's something that people need to recognize. Parents a lot of times need to recognize that too with their kids. It's like, it's all right for your kid to kind of just want to play a reasonable amount of video games or watch a reasonable amount of TV instead of going out and playing basketball or baseball and trying to be the next like celebrity sports figure. Like, it's all right for your kids to just have fun instead of studying so that they can get into Juilliard College and have a 4.0 plus GPA. Like, it's not going to happen for the vast majority of people. And as a government, that's where, again, capitalism falls apart. Is capitalism is built around this idea that anyone can succeed and raise their lot in life, and frankly a lot of people can't, and there needs to be safety nets, there needs to be social help handouts, there needs to be minimums that every human being deserves to have as far as food, water, shelter, and it is really just a red herring to say no, people literally deserve to starve in the streets because those people are lazy or stupid or undeserving in some way. That is an argument that could always be made, and an argument that is always not intellectually honest. Yeah. So I could go on a bigger rant for that, but yeah. Don't knock someone else's fun just because you're a type A personality who can't who obsesses about working too much. You certainly see that with Joe Rogan too. He's just constantly working, and the downside of that is inherently he will probably die of a heart attack in his 60s with it, because of it, because he'll just overwork himself to death. And people need to learn to take a break. Those types of people need to gain perspective and learn to take a break for their own sake. Regardless, moving on, we have a game with Asian titles, which looks like an asset flip first-person shooter. It looks pretty awful for 99 cents, English and Chinese. Still getting a massive amount of Chinese games. But I am starting to see with Shadowverse being on Steam and the Bleach cell phone game coming to Steam, we might be seeing the beginning of a wave of a lot of cell phone games having Steam PC ports also, which that might potentially create a feedback loop of quality in which people start reviewing these cell phone games on Steam and saying, this is just a cell phone port, this is not good enough, it needs more polish, it needs better graphics. And then maybe some developers will take that as feedback and we'll start to see better games, better gameplay mechanics in particular for cell phone games, because they know they want to bring it also to PC and the standards are higher. And at the very least, there's a chance of improvement there, where I'd say the Apple Store and the Google Play Store have basically no chance of seeing any improvement there until something really crazy happens and they start curating those stores and getting rid of the race to the bottom garbage games that exist now. Next we have a game on Steam called Wild West Survival, which again looks like a low polygon asset flip game. Well, it may not even be an asset flip game, it just looks like a low polygon survival game, so it's uninteresting. It's $15.99 English full audio early access. Let's see. Let's go ahead and load up the last 6 or 7. No, I still have more than 6 or 7 games to talk about. I went on a rant there. There's a lot of people also on YouTube talking about Joe Rogan just to get clicks. And then a lot of people who talk about these controversies, but then they want to bounce between one side and the other side and not actually have an opinion. So they're cowardly talking about it. I've seen some YouTubers that kind of do that with every single topic, and it's just like, hey, something's trending, so I'm going to talk about this, even though I have no opinion and don't know what's going on at all and have done no research. So I'm just going to say, oh, nothing at all about it. I'll just like repeat the most basic talking point on one side and then swap to the basic talking point on the other side. And then often they'll say something along the lines of, I don't really care, I'm just here for the memes type things, which definitely is not an opinion you want to hear when somebody's really unwilling to take a side and they don't really care. Like, generally, if you don't care, that's the point where you don't say anything. Moving on, we have a game called Phil, which looks like it's an RPG of some sort. Looks kind of awkwardly drawn. I think the color palette's a little off. Like, you have all yellow here. That's a bit of a problem. And then you have just a ton of brown here. So, yeah. It's just not visually pretty enough for me. It's free to play, English only. Let's see, next we have a game on Steam called Lapso Nimbo, which apparently is a sci-fi mystery game. Interesting. Kind of feels like a modern take on something like Myst. See some books and some pages. Is there anything else we can get from this video? Well, it's positive, so I'm going to put it on the follow list. It's free, but apparently it's also a trailer. See, in this case, this might be more than the trailer compared to the whole game, since there's apparently a game coming in 2020 called Lapso. And all the screenshots for this game definitely do look different. Yeah. This definitely is a problem that is growing as a thing, where it's fairly easy to make a trailer or a demo for a game that is actually got something that might be actually worth playing or talking about, and then the vast majority of people not seeing the demo or not playing the demo. At least that's been a great argument against not bothering to make demos in the past. Next we have a game here that's all in Asian characters. This seems to be a Chinese game, or maybe an extremely low effort Japanese game where it's kind of like a visual novel where they're going to different places and eating different foods. So it's kind of like a vacation story. $21.24. That's pretty ridiculous. With a bundle that's $82. It's Japanese only. I would call this one of those low effort Japanese games. You don't see a lot of them, but I would say that's what this is. See, next we have a game on Steam called Desktop Farm. I don't think I'd want to play any farming games. And I'm not seeing anything uniquely interesting about this one. It's $1.79. Bunch of languages. And they're trying to sell you a Fluid Engine PC Live wallpaper, which I guess maybe this game works with the wallpaper app, which you frankly are not doing enough with your computer if you're leaving it on a live wallpaper / screensaver. Like, I don't even have screensavers enabled because if I leave my computer on, it's depicting something like this almost always. So it's never a stationary image, and there's usually something happening. Moving on, as I try to hurry up, we have Solonaire's Edge 2 Champions, which looks like a RPG Maker game of no interest, for $3.59. That's an odd price, English only. Discounted to $3.59. Don't see a lot of games in that price range. Let's see. Next one is tag sexual content, so let me just double check that everything is YouTube family friendly. Yeah, it looks close enough. Next we have Sable's Grimoire, A Dragon's Treasure, which you have a rather muscular dragon girl here being depicted with a bandage bra. Look very, very muscular and extremely low skirt. So yeah, this is $5.39 English without full audio, and then Sable's Grimoire itself is $14.99. So this is a prequel to that game, or a demo to that game. In fairness, I will say that Sable's Grimoire itself is labeled very positively and came out in 2018, so it's like maybe it's a sequel. Also, this is not labeled as having any adult content, so they've gone in a different direction, and the animation here in the 2018 version does look like it's not particularly as polished. Oops, there was definitely some implied nudity there. Well, oops. Oops on that part. So much for avoiding that stuff. I suppose it is worth mentioning that the Winona Earp most recent episode I watched literally did have like a 5-minute sex scene like in it, and I'm like, okay. Almost every episode they do is talking dirty talk, and now they've just moved straight to softcore porn. Next we have a game on Steam called Dreaming Atlas. Honestly, that probably would work if the Sci-Fi Channel literally did have an adult block of just cosplaying cam girls and softcore porn. Probably would attract more people than they're getting right now by playing the same movies over and over again. This looks like a terrible RPG. Early access, English not supported. $7.64. See, Gamma Sutra has a job listing for Digital Extremes as an intermediate / senior FX artist in London, Ontario. I guess they're looking for both, or they're likely going to give you a different title based on your experience, which that's never fun. Certainly to say, hey, I think I should be a senior, listed as a senior here, and they go, nope, we're going to make you an intermediate person. Next we have an asset flip game here called Simp Simulator, which PewDiePie is using the simp insult a lot, and so it's now become just like trolly to call people simps, which I think the word has been overused, frankly. 89 cents, English only. There's nothing to say here. This is clearly just a low effort game where you're probably running around collecting gold and giving it to the female character they showed. Next we have Armored Head, which looks like a first-person shooter fighting robots. And there almost is something interesting around, like a cardboard box robot shooting other robots. Like if you were going for something kind of like a Serious Sam type clone, that idea might be fairly interesting. Although there is also a question about whether Serious Sam games are even interesting. I think I own a bunch of them, and I think I may very well find that it's not worth really playing any of them. Let's see. Yep. This does look like it's just infinite spawning enemies. This is $2.99 with a bunch of languages. I don't see anything interesting enough to justify that. Let's see. Next we have a game called Lockhart Indigo, which looks like it's an RPG Maker game, or maybe a Game Boy retro style game. Yeah, it kind of feels like maybe a Pokemon game type clone. I don't think I'd want to play this, but I'm going to put it on the fall list to give it a chance. 8-bit psychological thriller for $4.99. It is 100 rooms for keys and clues, 10 suspects, English only. I bet nobody ever plays this and reviews it, but there might be something there. Either that, or I'm just getting emotionally drained and now am not up to the task of rejecting bad games anymore and judging a book by a cover, which is all I really am doing ever for these games, is judging them by their cover, and that works fairly well. Next we have a game on Steam called Polygon Life, which looks like it is just asset flips of polygon buildings, environments, which I don't think there's actually any gameplay here from the looks of it. Early access, $3.59, English, Spain, Spanish. Got 3 more tabs, and then we'll be done. TechRaptor has an article here. The new Diablo Immortal trailer actually looks pretty good. Diablo Immortal is a mobile adaptation of the classic game. Let's see, is this the video they've got? There definitely is an idea, certainly, of taking Diablo 1 and taking the gameplay loop of Diablo and putting it on mobile, considering how hundreds upon thousands of people have already done that and stolen that idea. So that the real question, I guess, comes down to what can Activision Blizzard add that hasn't been added, or what kind level of polish or experience can they have. In a weird way, I would say the Diablo game should have been on cell phones a long time ago, and to the point where as soon as it was technologically possible, it should have been on Pocket PC, cell phones, and iPhone version ones. Like, Activision Blizzard should have had a game in that market, even if it was just a really bad version of Diablo that just made people want to go and play Diablo 1 and Diablo 2. They should have had something to have their foot in the door and potentially have some control of that market first, compared to now having to come into a market and regain it and take it over from all the pretenders and all the competitors that have stolen their ideas or stolen their general concept and potentially learned a lot of lessons and improved upon the things. Like Diablo 1 in itself, not particularly a great game without a mouse and keyboard, and by modern standards barely a great game even then. In the past it was basically a perfect game. So as other people have learned how to adapt that kind of gameplay to a cell phone, there's major improvements that could have happened. Moving on, we have Meditation VR, which, being on a beach, sitting in a lounge chair in VR, that's an interesting idea, certainly. Particularly if you already have a VR headset. Just being able to sit on a beach and hear beach sun sounds. I could see having like a tanning lamp or a tanning booth and having a VR headset on, although then you probably would have a weird tan line around your eyes. But you could have maybe a heat lamp that not actually tan you, just a warm bulb, and you could simulate the experience. This is free to play for VR too. That's not a bad idea, frankly. Everybody could learn to relax. I think a lot of times relaxing is stupidly labeled as meditation, and there's this whole idea that gets pushed by a bunch of California people as you've got to meditate, you've got to get into transcendental meditation to the point where it's becoming its own religion. But yeah, you can just call it relaxing, frankly, and taking a break. Most people are not going to be against the idea of relaxing, except for Joe Rogan. Apparently Joe Rogan has a problem with relaxing. Moving on from that low blow, we have a game called Perfect Gold Yuri visual novel. Yuri literally meaning like lesbian girl on girl love, or at least a like deep semi-romantic relationship between girls. Like there are some just undertones of lesbianism in a lot of Yuri stories without any actual admissions that they are romantically or sexually interested in each other. And I would say this is some kind of uniform that these people are wearing, and this is a skirt that you could call that a school outfit. There's a school patch on that, or some kind of patch. This is a blackboard, so if inherently Valve's argument is they don't want any girls that are in school outfits, well, this anime girl is in a school outfit in a school background. Here you can even see a school teacher. So what's the real difference between some games and other games that are allowed or not allowed on Valve? Probably the fact that this character is drawn a little bit taller and more anatomically correct, not in the moe art style. That this character has a relatively large chest to make her look older, too, probably helps. Or you never know, it very well may be that just a lot of these games, and this game in particular, might be kicked off of Valve, and Valve is just really bad about letting things on. This is labeled as coming soon, so there might be a level of that. It also does kind of just feel like Manga Gamer in particular is getting targeted to some level. Either Manga Gamer is pushing the limits, which might be the case, or Manga Gamer is getting targeted. Should also mention that this Yang Yang Mobile publisher is also the publisher of the game The Letter, which is on my wish list, and rated very positively. That's a horror visual novel, so that's something also to justify putting it on the fall list. Although, in all honesty, I'm gonna have to think really long and hard about how many visual novels should be allowed on the fall list alone, let alone on the wish list. Let's see, we have a book bundle from Humble Bundle called Game Design and Animation, which, yeah, I'm not sure how much information that's really going to help you. There's like level up your CSS animation skills. I don't know if you'll be using CSS to animate in games. Learn the foundations of Blender. Anybody that has to use Blender is probably going to need something like that. C++ game animation programming. Blender 3D examples. A lot of the books in the book bundles on Humble Bundle are very questionable though. Are these the industry standard books? Is this the important information to know, or is this going to be the unimportant things? Do you really need a book called Mastering SVG when you know that SVG is just a like scalable vector graphics format that you probably don't need an entire book around that? And this supports the Arthritis Foundation, which I guess in the long run, a lot of gamers in particular should be supporting the Arthritis Foundation, considering how there's a high chance of you getting arthritis if you game a lot. Like, I have a little bit of arthritis that flares up now and then. There's another programming book bundle that covers a whole bunch of programming languages. There's something to be said also that a lot of these programming books are all from the same publishing company, so there is kind of this ideas and narratives that are going to be maintained and controlled by the publishers, in the fact that the publishers are going to do business with a limited select group of authors, and those authors are going to have a way of doing things and thinking, certainly. So it is very possible that one bad author that has a good business relationship with a publishing company can push one bad idea or many bad ideas over and over again. And I don't think the programming books I had when I was learning programming were particularly that good. But then you also run into a problem in school where a lot of the teachers don't teach out of lessons plans from the books, or teach the or aren't that good of teachers, or they kind of just have their own opinions, like, or they may very well be trying to justify their own positions by saying, well, I know better than this book does, which, you know, that may very well be the case. So there's just an inherent inconsistency whatsoever. There is a pretty good argument to say teachers should just teach directly out of the books, for better or for worse, and then at least everybody will get an average experience, regardless of which teacher you had. But whether that's good or bad is set to the side. I'm going down my Twitter feed to see if there's any new bits of news. And we've got a couple of things, but not really seeing a lot of us. Let's see. Naughty Dog retweeting Last of Us cosplay again. Yeah, I think everybody's pretty much done talking about The Last of Us 2. That everybody's over it. Apparently in Marvel Adventures, Spider-Man is going to be an exclusive to PlayStation, and Thanos is going to be replacing Spider-Man. So one or the other. The Analog Pocket sells out in 15 minutes. I said that the Analog Pocket was the game with the crank on the side. Last time I talked about it, I was wrong. I think that is called the Replay. The Analog Pocket is basically a modern take on making a Game Boy, an actual Game Boy that has cartridges that can handle different ROMs. So, on top of just playing Game Boys, it will play other kinds of games like Genesis games and such. I don't think it's going to get into Nintendo 64 or anything like that. I don't think the controls are good enough for that. Like there's only 4 buttons and a D-pad. Let's see, still scrolling down. Actually, I don't think there's anything else to look at. Yeah. Still very much, if there weren't other factors to me scheduling on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, that there would be a very good argument to streaming Tuesday, Thursday, and like Saturday, or just Tuesday and Thursday. The card games inherently with their missions are always stacked in groups of 3, where if it was stacked in groups of 4, 5, 6, or 7, that would make it much more reasonable, so that I wouldn't have to come back and play the game so often. But yeah, we never get what we want, or we very rarely get what we want. So yeah, Tech Raptor has the article, Marvel's Adventure Spider-Man will be a PS4 exclusive. A lot of images not loading these days. I don't know if these are ads that are being blocked or what. I do think Tech Raptor kind of changed their website. And then we also have from Gamatsu, Acquire has trademarked Stealth Assassins in Japan, and Capcom has trademarked Darkstalkers, which potentially means that there will be a new Darkstalkers game, amongst several other Capcom games, which Darkstalkers would be a fighting game, or one would assume it was a fighting game. So, okay. Is there anything else that we need to talk about today? Nope. So I'm gonna go back to recording the main story gameplay of Shadowverse, and grinding out the temporary quests and uploading videos. I'm also doing that. That's a nightmare because I'm not able to use my macro because I don't have enough hard drive space once again. But yep, that's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.